Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. How does that actually work under the U.S. Constitution? Does it mean that the majority rules? Let's look at just facts. James Madison, father of the U.S. Constitution and primary author of the Bill of Rights, repeatedly emphasized that the United States is a republic and not a democracy. In stark contrast, Bloomberg columnist and former political science professor Jonathan Bernstein recently insisted that for all practical purposes and in most contexts, republic and democracy mean the same thing. He said that Madison was using a mild form of propaganda when he distinguished between the two forms of government. In reality, however, there are crucial differences between democracies and republics. Furthermore, they are vital to the issues of human rights and equal justice, and people who don't understand these differences are easy prey for those who would strip them of their rights. Early during the Constitutional Convention, Madison declared that the government it creates must provide more effectually for the security of private rights and the steady dispensation of justice. He said that violations of those rights had more, perhaps than anything else, produced this convention. Madison then singled out democracy as the cause of those abuses and pointed out that all societies are divided into sects, factions, and interests, and where a majority are united by a common interest or passion, the rights of the minority are in danger. He stressed that this is verified by the histories of every country, ancient and modern. This is the cause of slavery, the most oppressive dominion ever exercised by man over man. It is the duty of the convention to frame a republican system of government that will better protect the rights of the minority from the will of the majority. And it wasn't just Madison who voiced these concerns. Other delegates concurred, such as Edmund Randolph of Virginia, who said that the general object was to provide a cure for the evils under which the U.S. labored, that in tracing these evils to their origin, every man had found it in the turbulence and follies of democracy. Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts stated, "The evils we experience flow from an excess of democracy." That's why Madison and other framers of the Constitution devoted so much time to installing checks and balances in their new government. In the words of Madison, these provisions were to guard one part of society against the injustice of the other part, and will be exemplified in the Federal Republic of the United States. Yet people who are now vying to be President of the United States don't seem to understand this. Consider the Electoral College, for example. Democratic presidential hopeful Pete Buttigieg said, "It's gotta go. We need a national popular vote. It would be reassuring from the perspective of believing that we're a democracy." But the Electoral College is a safeguard against an oppressive democracy in which highly populated areas monopolize the U.S. presidential election. As illustrated in this electoral precinct map from Washington State University professor Ryan Rolla, the vast majority of America's communities voted for Donald Trump in 2016. Yet Hillary Clinton's personal vote count was higher, mainly due to support in big cities. Opposition to the Electoral College develops when students are taught that the U.S. is a democracy without any qualifiers. Another major implication is the centralization of power. U.S. presidents commonly complain about opposition parties standing in the way of their agendas, but the founders created different branches of government with the expressed purpose of keeping each other in their proper places, as stated in Federalist Paper 51. Without such separations of power, the paper explains, a stronger faction can readily unite and oppress the weaker, resulting in a government akin to anarchy because the weaker individual is not secured against the violence of the stronger. Arguably the most substantial check on tyrannical democracy created by the founders is Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. This allows the Constitution to be amended only with the approval of 3/4 of the states. This high bar is meant to prevent a simple majority from trampling on the rights of others, while allowing the Constitution to be improved as needed. Nonetheless, some wish the Constitution didn't have these provisions. Law and government professor Sanford Levinson at the University of Texas at Austin called the U.S. Constitution imbecilic and said the single worst part of it is surely Article 5, which has made our Constitution among the most difficult to amend of any in the world. He would like to make it easier to change, which would also make it easier for democratically elected majorities to strip people of their constitutional rights. This includes, for example, freedom of speech, the right to be tried by an impartial jury, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, and the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. This is why George Washington, the President of the Constitutional Convention, highlighted the import of Article 5 in his farewell address to the nation. If, in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way which the Constitution designates, but let there be no change by usurpation, for though this in one instance may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. And while all U.S. federal, state, and local officials take an oath of office to defend the Constitution, some usurp it in favor of their own agendas. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall summed up this attitude when he described his judicial philosophy like this: "You do what you think is right and let the law catch up." Or as a third-grade social studies textbook states, "The Supreme Court is made up of 9 judges. They make sure our laws are fair." There's a reason why judges are supposed to follow the Constitution rather than popular sentiments or personal views. Consider Korematsu v. United States. In this World War II era case, 6 of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's appointees to the Supreme Court ruled that it was constitutional to put U.S. citizens of Japanese descent into detention camps without any evidence of disloyalty to the United States. This was in complete defiance of the Constitution's Fifth Amendment requirement that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Had the justices faithfully applied the Constitution in Korematsu, this infringement on human rights would not have happened. However, under democratic standards it could, and it did. To Madison and other framers of the Constitution, the words democracy and republic had important differences. Democracy meant majority rule, and it still has this connotation today. A republic, on the other hand, meant a democratic government with limited powers that are widely divided among different voting blocs in order to protect the rights of as many people as possible. These important distinctions set the U.S. apart from other republics like the People's Republic of China or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Some conservatives say the U.S. is not democratic at all, but James Madison himself described our republic as a democratic form of government, and he said the Constitution preserves the spirit and form of popular government. As such, it begins with the words, "We the people." By melding the idea of government by the people with strong checks against mob rule, the founders of the U.S. produced what is now the longest-standing constitution of all nations in the world. As Encyclopedia Britannica explains, it is the oldest written national constitution in use, and it has served as a model for other countries, its provisions being widely imitated in other national constitutions throughout the world. I'm Amanda Reed Sheik, here with Just Facts. For thorough documentation of every fact in this video and more facts about this issue, read the article "The U.S. is a Democratic Constitutional Republic and Yes, It Matters" at justfactsdaily.com.